Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video. Today's video is going to be a film review of the movie Burning. If you have not seen it, it's a very interesting movie, I think, very different from what probably most mainstream viewers are watching. I believe it's uh, honestly, I don't remember. I think it's a Korean film. Um, it's definitely Korean because I remember somebody saying if you got interested in Korean films from watching Parasite, you should check out Burning. So that is actually why I watched Parasite, and I actually watched it. I would say I watched it the first week of the new year, so back in January, and it's just been a film that's really stuck with me actually, and I've thought about it after the fact quite a bit, and based on that, I thought, you know what, I want to make a film review of this movie. So without further ado, here we are. Um, this one I don't have as much of a structured style as I was going to do with the last ones. I guess when I think about it, I'll try and rate the acting, the directing, the writing, anything with the cinematography. Yeah, I guess we'll stick with those four categories right there. Um, So first off, I guess I'll talk about the cinematography. To me, there's not that much like phenomenal going on with it. I feel like it's generally standard. I'd probably give the cinematography like a B minus as far as it does exactly what it needs to do, but it never goes above and beyond expectation, or it never impresses me. It just meets expectations, I guess you'd say. So yeah, B minus for that. Um, I guess if I if I'm thinking about what's of note with the cinematography. There's a few distinct shots where they show things at night that are kind of cool. Like, obviously the title of the movie is Burning. They show some buildings burning at some point at night, and those are shot pretty cool. But besides that, there's nothing distinct really about the movie that warrants some special cinematography. I guess before we get into that, though, I want to kind of give a film. I guess before we get into the other categories, I want to give a review of the film just so you have some baseline for what it's about. Burning is a Korean film made in 2018. It is about a young man on the left, his two friends on the right. The one in the middle, the gal, he has a crush on, but she goes away on a trip, and when she comes back, she brings home her new boyfriend and introduces it to our main character, our protagonist on the left. He's a bit downtrodden by that. I actually don't remember any of the main characters' names, but um, so basically the three of them just hang out throughout the movie, and then an event happens towards the middle or latter half of the movie that kind of changes the scope of the three of their lives, and you kind of, for the rest of the movie, deal with the repercussions of that, and the main character kind of handles that situation in an interesting way, and you kind of follow his emotional journey throughout it. um, I don't want to give too much about the plot away because I think there's some twists and turns and a few surprises here and there that if I give too much away, it'll take away a bit from the film itself. I will say this is one thing that I'll detract from the movie on. It's very, very long. Like, another title they could have considered for this movie is Slow Burning. Um, it's it's 2 hours and 35 minutes, I believe, and honestly, it could stand to be an hour 40, I think, and it would do just fine. It really takes its time and really practices patience, and I think you as a viewer, you can buy into it for the first hour and a half, I'd say, and then at that point, um, the so-called like big event that I'm talking about probably happens, or not a big event, but there's kind of a distinct shift in the movie from one point to the next, and that happens with I'd say about an hour left. And the last hour of the movie to me starts dragging after that event happens, and I guess I'd say I enjoyed the first half of the movie more than the second half. Um, on the right, you have the guy from The Walking Dead. His real name is Steven Yeun. Um, I like this actor quite a bit. Obviously, I was a big Walking Dead fan when he was on the show, so I was really excited to see him in a. I guess Walking Dead is very serious. I was going to say a more serious role, maybe a less fantasy fictiony role. This is a much more grounded in reality performance, and um, He, I think, plays a very different character from his character on The Walking Dead, and that was pretty cool to see. Um, Besides that, overall thoughts on the movie. It, as I said, the pacing is very slow. I think that's a big detraction for it for me. That's probably my main detraction from it. Overall directing, they do a lot of things with theme in this movie. Um, the director wants you to feel certain emotions evoked at certain points and get certain messages from various things that he's showing as far as imagery. Interesting is that they actually use a lot of imagery in this movie, but the cinematography actually isn't that impressive. So that's an interesting contrast to me. The director really goes for just I guess you'd call it reading between the lines. You're supposed to pick up on a lot of things in this movie without having them spoon fed to you. There's this concept in movies that's called 1 + 1 = blank. And basically, the movie is saying if we give you these two things that happen and we don't tell you how they play out, you should be able to figure how they play out from what we've set up for you. So, for instance, a good example of this is in No Country for Old Men, which is a different movie. Um, there's a scene where a guy walks into a house. He's holding a gun. The woman says, like, "What are you doing here?" And then they cut to the next scene, and he's walking out of the house with blood on his boot. So you can figure in that moment what happened inside the house, despite them not showing it. It's like they're not spoon feeding you the answer, they're kind of giving you context clues and letting you figure out what happened. This movie, Burning, does a ton of that, and usually that's pretty good for a movie. Sometimes when you're doing a lot of it, it's hard to keep up with, and as a viewer, you might have to rewind it or pay extra close attention or go back and read about the movie afterwards and interpret something. I had to do some of that. I ended up doing quite a bit of that mostly because I was interested in the movie and wanted to kind of learn more about it and think through a lot more of the content in the movie and a lot of the themes and possible interpretations. But I ended up reading a lot just about like some of the reading between the lines parts too, because there's a lot of different ways to interpret what happens in this movie, and the plot is pretty open, and they do a lot of the 1 + 1 = blank. So you have to basically figure a lot out on your own. And it's not an ambiguous ending or anything like that, but there is a lot of ambiguity within the plot itself. So you kind of have to make for it what you will of certain events that take place and what do those events really represent. So I'm kind of blending directing and writing right there. So I guess that's a good transition into writing. The dialogue is not that heavy. Again, like because a lot of the movie is written in between the lines, and as a whole, the movie itself is quite quiet. It's not dialogue heavy or anything like that. Um, there's not a lot of like juicy pieces of monologues or anything as such. What I do think the movie does well is the script has a lot of tension in it, despite there not necessarily being dialogue during those parts. Like there are scenes where a character is in the car following another character in another car, and it's just super tense. And they had to write it that way, but it's not like it's tense from an argument or something. It's just tense from how it's performed on screen. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about the acting quick. Really subtle by all three main characters. Really nuanced, I would say, in that they have these subtle ticks and they really are able to embody who they're playing very well. Very believable, I'd say. Out of the main three, I'd say the worst is the female lead. Mainly just because I feel like she's given the least amount of depth of the three characters. And the other two, I feel like you get to know more about than her. And she has a lot more mystery surrounding her. And um, I would just say the other two, you get to see uh, just more of what they're about than her. Um, so from that perspective, I think based on her having less depth to her, the actress had less to work with than the other two. So that doesn't mean that her acting was worse. It just was a result of the writing. But as far as the acting goes, the main character really knocks out of the park, and Steven Yeun really does solid with what he's given as well. Overall, guys, I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. I would recommend it to you if you like um, movies that you really have to gnaw on afterwards. I'd say there's a lot of interpretation going on in this movie. It's not super straightforward. If you like to analyze films and kind of say, well, what was happening there, and what do you think that meant? What did that really represent, and what did that lead to? Then I would suggest this movie because I literally went on Reddit after I watched this movie and read Reddit interpretations of this thing for hours and days afterwards, and people saying, well, what like theories on what happened here and what happened there, and to me that stuff is pretty fun. So if you dig that kind of thing and you really dig getting into what really was meant to be represented by certain things happening in a movie, I think you'd get a kick out of this. And without saying much more, I just say go watch it. I believe it's on Netflix, and again, it's called Burning, 2018. Would highly recommend. Alright guys, that's all I got for today. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.